Title of today's sermon is I Am Because God Is. Can we say that together? 1, 2, 3. I am because God is. Okay. All right. And so I'm assuming that most of us know what the story of Moses is, right? What the life of Moses was like. I'm sure you learned about it many times growing up in the church and Sunday school and things like that. But Moses was like the lead star in your favorite action movie, right? For some of you, it actually is your favorite movie. But if you look at the life of Moses, I mean, it reminds me a lot of, like, I know this is before your time, but it reminds me of like a Rocky movie. But it seems like a good action movie, right? If you go all the way back to the beginning, as a baby, he was able to evade death, even though all the boys were being killed, right? And his mom put him in that basket, float him down the river. Okay, that right there, it's already a miracle that he was able to survive that. But then Pharaoh's daughter finds him, and then he's able to grow up in the palace. Okay, so he went from being in the lowest place possible to be of the Jewish boys being killed, and then he's just out on the river, right? Anything could have happened, right? One wrong wave, current, or I don't know, some predatory animal or something, right? Something could have happened, or a soldier finds him, but he's able to overcome the most humble of places and then end up at the top, right? He's able to end up in the palace, okay? Prince of Egypt. And then now he's and then he grows up, right? And or right around my age, right? Right around 40 years old. He, instead of enjoying the rest of his life just comfortably in the palace, when he saw a Hebrew slave, right? So he grew up with that confusion, right? He's in the palace, he's a prince of Egypt, but then he knows he's actually Hebrew, right? And there's this like identity crisis, right? And so when he sees a Hebrew slave getting beaten up, right? It's like, I don't know. I mean, the most like relatable thing I can think of is like at least like my parents' generation growing up under Japanese rule, right? But some of them had to like work for the Japanese, right? So just like imagine that tension of like, you're Korean, my people are Korean, my people are being killed and abused, right? But then you're working for the enemy, right? And you may even be helping them to do that, right? And so Moses had that moment, and so he just got caught up in that moment, in the heat of the moment. And what did he do to the Egyptian that was beating up the Hebrew? Killed him, right? So just he had that moment of rage and just beat the guy to death, right? So yeah, I mean, like, it's like every movie I loved watching growing up. I loved martial arts movies, right? It's that feel, right? And then so he flees Egypt, and while he's taking a break at a well in Midian, what happened? He saw some shepherds abusing 7 sisters, okay? And then he has this kind of like knight in shining armor moment, right? What a gentleman Moses was. But he saves them, okay? And then he not only saves them, but they were there because they had to water their flock. Okay, that's not an easy job. So he not only saves them, these 7 sisters, but then he waters their flock for them, right? Some of you might be thinking like, oh, Moses was a simp, right? Maybe, but either way, okay, awesome moment, cool stuff, right? And so then these ladies are so impressed. Father's impressed. He gets invited to their house, and he's even given one of the daughters to marry. Okay, and then what happens? He becomes a shepherd in that house for the next 40 years. Okay, think about that. He went from being a prince in Egypt to a very lowly, looked down upon job in those times, a shepherd. Okay, that's like, okay, and I'm not saying anything bad about, this is just the example I'm using, okay? There's nothing bad about like being a janitor, okay? But it would be like being the CEO in the building to then being the janitor, okay? But even more extreme, right? And so now, okay, 40 more years pass. Anybody know how old he is at this point? If you're doing your math, it's like 80 years old, okay? And you might be wondering, is this how an action movie should end, right? Moses, he might be wondering, is this how I ride off into the sunset? I went from the palace, now I'm watching these sheep. Right? Moses, for 40 years, it's been a long time. He's long settled down. Okay, he's nowhere near all that action, right? All that rage and fury and like beating people up and things like that, like the peak of the action movie. He has long settled, and he's just a shell of himself. Okay. Anybody know what the meaning of Moses is? The name? Nobody has a friend named Moses or a sibling named Moses? No? Pretty common name for Koreans. Moses. It means to draw out. Okay, and so you can probably guess he was named that by the Pharaoh's daughter because she drew him out of the water, right? Now, Moses, his life turned around drastically, okay, and some pretty cool stuff happened in his life because he was drawn out by Pharaoh's daughter, but it's about to get even better because it's God's turn to draw him out, okay? Here we go. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Here we go. Meanwhile, Moses was shepherding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire within a bush. As Moses looked, he saw that the bush was on fire but was not consumed. Okay, so the bush was just burning constantly, but it wasn't burning. It wasn't burning up. So Moses thought, I must go over there and look at this remarkable sight. Okay, like this is a miraculous thing. And so he goes over there and he wonders, why isn't this bush burning up? When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, he answered. Do not come closer, he said. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he continued, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Let's pause there. Okay, as you can imagine, Moses, he probably had a pretty intense identity crisis his whole life. He knew that he's actually a Hebrew, but then he's growing up in an Egyptian palace and he's being educated by Egyptians, right? He's learning their language, their culture, their history, right? But you can imagine he probably had a pretty tough time, okay? For those of us that are, I'm sorry, I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but for me, I grew up as a Korean American, right? And that was pretty confusing because at home, my parents were super Korean, okay? So for those of you that know what that means, that you know. If you know, you know. But then I go to school and I hang out with my friends, my non-Korean friends, and they're completely different, right? It's a completely different culture, right? So just to give you like an example, like one funny example, right? In Korean culture, if somebody's older than you, even just 1 year older than you, what do you have to do? 안녕하세요, 형님. Right? You have to like bow to your elders, even if they're just like 1 year older than you. You have to just automatically respect them. You have to automatically honor them just because they're older than you. And even if they're treating you like dirt, you still have to respect them just because they're older than you, right? But then in American culture, it's completely different. You could just go up to like a white grandpa and be like, "Hey, what's up, Bob?" just like dap him up. It's very different, completely different cultures, right? And so Moses, in a similar way, maybe even more intense, grew up with this sort of identity crisis. Okay, but then at the same time, like his mother tongue, his mother people, they were enslaved. Okay, so that's got to be pretty tough, right? A pretty tense situation to grow up in. Okay, But then at the ripe old age of 80 years old, some of you think like I'm old, right? But he's 80, twice my age at this point. And at this point, at 80 years old, is when God settles the identity crisis for Moses, right? Verse 7. And the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people in Egypt and have heard them crying out because of their oppressors. I know about their sufferings, and I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians, to bring them from that land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the territory of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. So because the Israelites' cry for help has come to me, and I have also seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them, therefore go. I am sending you to Pharaoh so that you may lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. All right? Guys, what do you think Moses' biggest question was right here? Okay, so the identity crisis, God is settling it. Okay, so all right, so I am a Hebrew. Okay, the Israelites are my people, and God is calling me to go and save my people. And he's met, his God, the God of his people. But what do you think Moses' biggest question is right here? God, why now? Why not when I was that action movie star? When I was at the peak of my martial arts career, when I was a black belt in Taekwondo, when I was literally able to beat guys to death. I'm 80 now. I'm just an old man. I just watch over these sheep all day. But why might this be the better time? Why might this be the right time in God's eyes? Guys, I'm going to be a little vulnerable with you guys right now, just kind of a bit of a confession here, but the biggest hurdle for me being a pastor in my 20s was that I didn't know how to get out of the way. I didn't know how to get out of the way, right? It always had to just be my way, what I thought was right, the way I wanted to do things, right? But please don't tell your parents this, but there was one time where one year so this is at a different church, okay, and I was much younger, but I grew up going to overseas mission trips, right? I grew up going to Mexico, right? I went multiple times. Mexico was where I got my call to be a pastor, right? When I was sharing my testimony at a prison in Mexico, Tijuana, Mexico, right? So I had like a very soft spot for like overseas missions, and when I first became a youth pastor, I wanted to do the same thing. But my youth pastor, my senior pastor, he was like, no, can't do that. It's too dangerous. He's like, you need to do your summer mission trip in DC. You need to stay in the area. And I was passionately against that. Right? Like, what do you mean? Like, what can we do here? What can we do in DC? Or what kind of crazy stuff could we do in DC? I want to take them to like Mexico or like, somewhere out of the country. And he was just like, no. But I couldn't get out of the way. I did not have a humble bone in my body. Right? You guys have ever heard that saying, like the phrase, like humble pie, like eating humble pie? I did not know what that tasted like. I know what apple pie tastes like, pumpkin pie tastes like. I did not know what humble pie tasted like at all. Right? And so guess what I did? I planned a mission trip secretly without my senior pastor knowing. And then I told him like 4 days before, oh yeah, by the way, we're like going like this far away for this mission trip. And you can imagine he was enraged, right? Like it was not good, right? But just to give you an example of how stubborn I was, that's how bad it was, right? I did not know how to get out of the way, right? I was younger, I was stronger, I was more on fire, I was more charismatic, I was more of everything, okay? But when things didn't go my way, what would I do? I just jump ship, abandon ship. I would go on my way, right? And throughout my 20s, I averaged like a year and a half at each church. I think I went to like 8 different churches in my 20s, right? And then so some of you might be wondering, oh, so how has he been here at GMC for 7 years in his 30s? The only reason why I've been able to stay put is because I've been able to wrestle with the reality that it's probably not about me, right? This life, it's not about me. Church, it's not about me. Ministry, it's not about me. Youth ministry is not about me. Right? I still struggle with that, but at least I'm wrestling with it now. Whereas in my 20s, it's like, no, it is about me, right? Everything's about me. When Moses was younger, he probably would have done a similar thing. He probably would have made it about him. He probably would have done things his own way instead of listening to God. But here's the problem with that, guys. As long as you're living like that, you will never get to see what God is capable of. Right? We were talking about this in our teachers' meeting this morning, but just imagine Moses' life in like a graph, in a line graph. Okay, so he started at the lowest place possible, right? All the other babies were being killed. He was able to survive that. Okay, so he's at the lowest point, just floating down the river. Okay, and then he gets saved by Pharaoh's daughter. He ends up in the palace, and so he reaches the highest place in the world. Okay, in a worldly way, he reaches the highest place. There's no higher place in the world than the palace. Okay, but then he commits murder. He runs away, and then he ends up in a low place again as a shepherd, and he's old now. Okay, not capable of much. Okay, but then he eats that humble pie. He gets out of the way, and he allows God to come into his life and do what God does in his life. He's able to get out of the way. And then what happens? Does he reach that same high place as being in the palace? No, he's literally able to defeat Pharaoh. He's able to defeat the powerful armies of Egypt. And so he's like, bam! So if you look at the graph, the peaks of his life, the peak of him in the world, his own abilities, right? His own ability to study Egyptian culture and just, stay in a good place with Pharaoh and stuff, comes nowhere near what God is able to do through his life. God obliterates the human peaks, the worldly peaks, the secular peaks, what we're able to accomplish in this world. Maybe one of you might reach the palace one day. Most of us will not. Most of us, our peaks will be somewhere down here. But what God can do through our lives when we completely submit ourselves to him will obliterate what we can accomplish in this life. Amen? Amen. And so what did God do? Right? God knew he can do so much more than Moses ever able to do. Right? If you were like me, you grew up watching martial arts movies and you saw Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan or who are some of the more recent ones? Donnie Yen, people like that, just like being able to fight hundreds of guys. And you know it's not possible. It's not real, right? But at most, that's what Moses probably would have been able to do. But God was able to do so much more, and he knew that, and so God made him a shepherd. Anybody watch Karate Kid? The older one or the newer one? Yeah. So in the old one, it's the wax on, wax off, right? And Daniel's son, and I get triggered when I hear that because I grew up being called Daniel's son all the time. I hate that, right? But it's like, why am I doing this all day, every day? Why am I just doing the waxing, right? And then in the newer one with Jackie Chan, what happened? The jacket, right? Put the jacket on. Take the jacket off. Put the jacket on. He's just every day. He's like, why am I doing this? I hate this. And he's like crying and stuff, right? Will Smith's son, right? God puts Moses basically in that place of quietly, but there's a lesson there, right? Mr. Miyagi is teaching a lesson. They're not able to realize it, right? But God is quietly teaching him the patience and humility it takes to shepherd millions of sinful human beings. Because for those of you that know what happens later, you guys know the Israelites were just a bunch of complaining, whiny little sinful brats, right? Like the moments where Moses would step away, what would they do? They would create these golden statues and idol worship and just do the most horrible things, right? They would be the hardest bunch of people, okay, that he'll ever have to manage. And God is quietly teaching him that. And here's the thing, guys. Here's the takeaway for this point, is that there are things that the palace cannot teach you. There are things that the comforts of this life cannot teach you. There are things that, when you're just living in the comforts and the luxuries of your comfortable life, that cannot train you to be who you were meant to be in God. Right? A lot of us are living life in a way where it does not train us to live our lives to the fullest, to the way that God created us and designed us and destined us to be. Right? God has great things in store for each and every single one of us, if you're willing to lay down your life and submit yourself to Him. But a lot of us, we're just kind of living in that way, that lifestyle, that does not train us for what God has in store. Okay? And so the palace could not teach Moses for what God had planned for him. Okay? The best education system in Egypt, the best food in Egypt, right? The best lifestyle could not train Moses for what God had in store for him. Right? It's like he almost had to come down from being CEO to being the janitor to learn, to train for what God had in store for him. Okay? But little did Moses know that God would do all the work. All the work. How much of the work? All the work to defeat Pharaoh, and Moses would be able to come back to this mountain, Mount Horeb, not with sheep, but with God's people to worship God. Okay? And so he's 80 years old now. He has no reason to trust in himself. Okay? There's no reason why an 80-year-old shepherd should ever believe that they can defeat entire armies. Okay? And so he's in this complete humble place now. Okay? Verse 11. And so Moses asked God, "Who am I?" I'm just an 80-year-old shepherd. "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" Okay, he knows how big and powerful Pharaoh is. He lived in that palace. "That I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt." He answered, "I will certainly be with you." Okay, God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign." This will be the sign. Me being with you will be the sign to you that I am the one who sent you when you bring the people out of Egypt. You will all worship God at this mountain. Then Moses asked God, "If I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your ancestors has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what should I tell them?" God replied to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." God also said to Moses, "Say this to the Israelites. The Lord, or Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered in every generation." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Guys, this is the central question to every identity crisis. Okay, is there anyone in this room that struggles with their identity? Probably all of us, right? Struggles of knowing who you truly are. But that is the central question of an identity crisis: who am I? And what is God's response to Moses' identity crisis? To his essential question of who am I? What's his response? I am. Okay, Moses asks, "Who am I?" And God says, "I am. I am." That's all we need to know. My identity is who God is. Right. Anybody ever heard the term Imago Dei? Imago Dei, that is the image of God. We were created in what? The image of God. We were created in the image of God. When God was thinking us up, he was brainstorming us. Right? All the other animals and creatures, he had different designs and stuff for. But for us, turn to your neighbor, for you to say, you were created in the image of God. Right. When God thought each and every single one of us in this room, he decided to create us in his image. In God, whose image? God's image. Okay, Imago Dei. Okay, and so guys, the only way I will ever become sure of who I am is for me to get out of the way and let God be in my life. Okay? Hey, you can go your whole life struggling with who you are. Go ahead. But for those of you that don't want to struggle with that anymore, right? I'm sure deep down all of us want to be able to just be confident. I don't want to look in the mirror and hate myself. I don't want to go into a room full of people with just all these insecurities and, oh my gosh, like, are they going to like me, or how are they going to respond, or even evangelism, right? It's like, I have the greatest news in all the world. But then I'm like, oh my gosh, but what if they reject me? What if they mock me, right? Like, we would all love to be just able to have that like rock solid confidence, to be able to go up to anybody, be around anyone, right? But the only way that we will ever reach that point is when we allow I am who God is to reign in who I am in my life. My identity needs to be who God is, right? Guys, imagine me trying to figure out who I am without ever knowing who my dad is, right? I don't mean this in like a disrespectful way at all, but when I was in Korea, Korea had a program where there were some decades where a lot of Korean babies were adopted, right? For a time, like Korean babies were some of the most adopted babies, right? And so there were a lot of Korean babies that just grew up in with white parents, for example. You look in the mirror, you're like, what? like I don't look like you. And some of them have like siblings, and they're like all white, blue eyes, and it's like blonde hair. It's like, okay, I get it. Like I've been calling you mom, dad, brother, sister my whole life, but I don't know. And Korea had a program where I think they still do, where they will pay for your whole trip to come to Korea, because so many of them are just like, they want to know who their real parents are. So the Korean government, they pay for them, their flight and everything, to come to look for their parents, right? And so I met a lot of these people in Korea, and one of my closest friends, he was like 50 years old, right? But he had been searching in Korea for like 20 years. Couldn't find his biological parents, any biological family, right? And man, like there were times where we'd just be like sitting at the Han River together, and he would just be like opening up about that. And it's just like, it's like soul crushing, like heartbreaking to have to just like, because what can I say? Like what can I do in that moment to like help him feel better? But some of the most like broken, lost people I've seen. And guys, like I told you, I used to live with North Korean refugees. Okay, I've been with people that starved under, North Korean dictator. Okay, but still, they like had like somewhat of a joy, right? Some of the like the most like depressed, like heartbroken people I met were these people that didn't know who their parents were, right? But even for you guys, right? Imagine trying to figure out who you are. Okay, right. So just think about it for a second, right? Who would you be without your parents? Right. Let's just consider the basic stuff: having a roof over your head, having food on the table, clothes in the closet, running water, electricity. Right? Just take all the fundamental basic stuff and take it away. Who would you be without them? I've met 15-year-old homeless teens, no parents. Right? Just imagine it for a second. Right? Where would you be? Who would you be without your parents? All right, and then on the other side, on the flip side, right? It helps so much to know our parents, right? It helps so much in knowing who we are and knowing our parents and having them there, right? But beyond just having a dad who might just instruct you, tell you when you're not acting right, right? Tell you the things that you should be doing, right? But how much more powerful is it to have a dad that says, "All right, let me show you who I am, right? Let me show you what I'm about," and he shows through his actions what it means to have his last name, to be in that family, right? How much more of a powerful impact is that going to have in your life and how you grow up? Right? If you talk to people my age, a lot of them say, I'm the way I am because of the way my parents raised me. I didn't appreciate it at the time. I didn't quite understand it at the time, but I am who I am today because of them, right? But then even farther than that, guys, how much stronger of a sense of self will we have if we know who our Father in heaven is? Our creator, our maker, the one that designed us, the one that wired us, right? Knows every thought, right? Intricately, like if you've studied like, DNA and cells and stuff like that, right? The one that created all of that. Think about how deep your sense of self would be, how deep and rock solid your identity would be when you know that Father, our Father in heaven. Like, God is my identity because he is everything. He is everything. And so, guys, if we have unwavering, rock solid peace, it's because God is my eternal joy. Right? If I have real purpose in this life, it's because God has called me. If I'm able to actually love anyone, it's because God has shown me real love on the cross. If I am of anything of real substance, it's because God is. Without him, I am nothing. I have nothing. It is all meaningless, vain, and pointless, and void of any hope, right? Think of Solomon. Solomon had everything. He was in the palace, his own palace. He had everything in the world, anything that every man could dream of. And you realized it's all pointless. It's all vain. It's all meaningless. He died a bitter old man, a sad old man. Right? If I have anything that is true, it's because God is. It's because I allow God to be God in my life. And so one more time, can we say, I am because God is? Right? Guys, that is how Moses will be at his best in his 80s. And that is how we will be at our best now. Let's pray.